If these words found you today, it is not by accident. Somewhere inside you, a quiet voice has been asking the same question for a long time. Why does life feel harder than it should? Why do the same promises to yourself keep breaking week after week, year after year? You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are simply undisciplined in the one place that matters most, and no one ever taught you that discipline is not punishment. Discipline is freedom wearing a work coat. There is an old principle, tested by generations of ordinary people who became extraordinary, that says this: 30 days of true discipline can rewrite the direction of an entire life. Not 30 years, not 30 months, 30 days. It sounds too simple to be true, and that is exactly why most people never try it. Before we go further, let us be honest about something. You have probably tried before. You have written the goals. You have felt the fire on a Sunday night, only to watch it die by Wednesday afternoon. This is not a failure of willpower. It is a failure of understanding. Most people try to change their life by changing their actions alone, without ever touching the deeper machine underneath those actions. Today, we go underneath. Long before the modern world filled our pockets with distraction, wise men and women understood a simple law. The mind does not resist discipline because discipline is hard. The mind resists discipline because discipline threatens identity. Every human being carries a silent picture of who they believe themselves to be. If that picture says, I am someone who sleeps late, someone who quits when things get uncomfortable, someone who talks about big plans but never finishes them, then no amount of motivation will overpower that picture for long. Motivation is a spark. Identity is the fuel. Without fuel, the spark burns bright and dies fast. This is why the first days of any new discipline feel like a war. You are not fighting laziness. You are fighting an old version of yourself that has been running the show for years, sometimes decades. That old version feels safe. It is familiar even when it is unhappy. And the mind, more than anything else, chases familiar over good. But here is the hidden truth almost no one tells you. You do not need to defeat that old identity in one great battle. You only need to outlast it one day at a time, for about 30 days. There is a quiet reason this number keeps appearing across generations of thinkers, healers, and builders. It is roughly the time it takes for a repeated action to stop feeling like an intruder and start feeling like a resident. The behavior does not change on day one. The believer changes slowly day by day until one morning the hard thing simply feels like Tuesday. Let us talk about a man named Walter. Walter worked in a small machine shop on the edge of a river town, the kind of place where the sound of metal never really stopped, even at night. He was 34 years old, married with 2 children and a mortgage that felt heavier every winter. Walter was not a bad man. He was a tired man. He woke late, rushed to work, did enough to avoid trouble, came home exhausted, and told himself that tomorrow he would start eating better, start reading again, start saving money, start being the father his children deserved on the weekends instead of the man collapsed on the couch. Tomorrow came, and tomorrow looked exactly like today. One evening, Walter's daughter asked him a question that most fathers never forget. She asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. Walter laughed, the way adults laugh when a child says something they think is silly. But the question sat in his chest all night like a stone. He was 34. He was already grown. And somewhere along the way, he had stopped becoming anything at all. He had simply been surviving. That night, Walter could not sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold and made a decision that felt small at the time but would change the shape of everything that followed. He decided he would give himself 30 days. Not 30 years of promises, 30 days of proof. He would wake 1 hour earlier. He would walk instead of driving the short distance to the corner store. He would read 10 pages before bed instead of staring at the ceiling. He would speak to his wife with patience even when he was tired. Small things. Almost embarrassingly small. The first week was brutal. His body fought him every morning. His mind whispered that 1 hour of extra sleep would not hurt, that he could start properly next Monday, that 30 days was a foolish idea from a tired man at midnight. Few people noticed what came next, because it did not look dramatic from the outside. Walter kept going anyway, not because he felt strong, because he had decided that his word to himself mattered more than his comfort. By the second week, something shifted that Walter could not fully explain. The early mornings still felt difficult, but they no longer felt impossible. He noticed his thinking had grown quieter, steadier. The walk to the store, once a chore, became the part of his day where his best ideas arrived. He began speaking to his children differently, with more patience, because a rested, disciplined mind has more patience to give than an exhausted one. By the third week, a strange thing happened at the machine shop. Walter's supervisor noticed he had started arriving early, checking equipment that was not his responsibility, offering solutions before problems became expensive. Nothing about Walter's job had changed. Everything about Walter had changed. The world simply began responding to a different man. On day 30, Walter did not feel like a different person waking up in the same body. He felt like the same person who had finally stopped lying to himself. His daughter asked him again what he wanted to be when he grew up. This time Walter did not laugh. He told her quietly that he wanted to be a man who kept his word, especially to himself. She did not fully understand it then. She would understand it years later when she remembered her father not as a tired man on a couch, but as the man who taught her, without ever saying it directly, that a life is built one disciplined day at a time. The real lesson in Walter's story is not about waking up early. Waking up early was simply the vehicle. The real transformation happened in a much quieter place, in the part of the mind where a person decides what kind of person they are. Every time you keep a small promise to yourself, you cast a vote for a new identity. Every time you break one, you cast a vote for the old one. 30 days is simply enough votes to change the outcome of the election. There is a psychological pattern worth understanding here because it explains why so many people quit on day 4 or day 7. The brain is wired to protect energy. For thousands of years, conserving energy meant survival. New behavior, especially disciplined behavior, feels expensive to a brain built for conservation. This is why the first days of any change feel heavier than they should. Your brain is not broken. It is simply doing its ancient job, mistaking a new habit for a threat to your energy reserves. The good news hidden inside this discomfort is this: the resistance you feel in the first days is not a sign you are failing. It is a sign the old pattern is dying. Discomfort is not the enemy of discipline. Discomfort is the price of it, paid early, so that ease can be collected later. Long before modern science explained any of this, the builders of great civilizations understood it instinctively. They knew that comfort chosen too early and too often quietly weakens a person, while discomfort chosen on purpose quietly strengthens one. This is why farmers wake before the sun. This is why soldiers train before they are tested. This is why the old principle of self-mastery has survived every generation, every culture, every language. It works because it is built on how the human mind actually operates, not on temporary trends or clever tricks. Consider Thomas Edison, a man history remembers for the electric light. Though few remember the thousands of failed attempts that came before it, Edison did not succeed because he was smarter than everyone around him. He succeeded because he treated failure as information rather than identity. Each failed experiment did not tell him he was a failure. It told him one more way that did not work, which meant he was one step closer to the way that did. This is discipline in its purest form, not the absence of failure, but the refusal to let failure write the final chapter. Or consider Marie Curie working long hours in a cold shed, handling materials that science did not yet understand were dangerous, driven not by comfort but by a devotion to her work that outlasted exhaustion, doubt, and public dismissal. Her discipline was not loud. It was steady, repeated, unglamorous, the same careful measurements performed again and again until the truth revealed itself. Greatness rarely announces itself with fireworks. It arrives quietly through repetition most people are too impatient to endure. This brings us to a hidden truth about discipline that almost no one discusses honestly. Discipline is not about doing something extraordinary. It is about doing something ordinary without negotiation every single day. The person who reads 10 pages a night for 30 days will read 300 pages, roughly a full book, without ever feeling like they did anything heroic. The person who saves a small amount of money every single day for 30 days builds not just savings, but something far more valuable, a proven relationship with their own word. This is worth pausing on, because it touches something deeper than habits or productivity. Every time you tell yourself you will do something, and then you do it, you are not just completing a task. You are building self-respect. Self-respect is not something you can purchase, borrow, or fake for long. It is earned in private, in the moments no one else sees, when you choose to keep a promise to yourself even though breaking it would be easier and no one would ever know. Most people search for confidence in the wrong places. They look for it in achievements, in the approval of others, in comparison to people who seem to have less. But real confidence, the kind that does not collapse the moment life gets difficult, is built through a much simpler process. It is built through evidence. Every disciplined action, no matter how small, becomes evidence submitted to your own mind that you are someone who follows through. Over enough days, that evidence becomes undeniable, even to the most doubtful part of you. This is why 30 days of discipline can transform a life more than 30 years of wishing. Wishing produces no evidence. Discipline produces evidence daily, and evidence is what the mind actually believes. Let us talk now about fear, because fear is the quiet saboteur behind almost every broken promise to oneself. Not always the dramatic fear of danger, but the smaller, sneakier fears, the fear of discomfort, the fear of failing publicly, the fear of succeeding and then being expected to keep succeeding. Many people unconsciously sabotage their own progress not because they want to fail, but because failure feels familiar and safe, while sustained success feels like unfamiliar territory with unknown demands. Understanding this changes everything. The next time you feel the urge to quit a new discipline halfway through, ask yourself honestly, is this truly too difficult, or is this simply unfamiliar? Difficulty and unfamiliarity feel almost identical in the body, but they require very different responses. Difficulty sometimes means stop and reconsider. Unfamiliarity almost always means keep going, because the discomfort is not danger, it is growth wearing danger's clothing. Here is your first practical action, small and immediate. Tonight, before you sleep, choose one single discipline you will practice for the next 30 days. Not 5 disciplines, one. The mind cannot rebuild its entire identity in every direction at once, but it can absolutely rebuild itself around one committed behavior, repeated without negotiation. Choose something small enough that you cannot honestly say it is impossible, and important enough that completing it daily will mean something to you. Write it down, not in your mind. On paper where your eyes can meet it every morning. Let us turn now to a second story, because principles are remembered through people, not through explanations alone. There was a woman named Ruth who worked as a nurse in a busy hospital ward. She loved her patients, but she had quietly lost herself somewhere in the years of double shifts, missed meals, and nights spent caring for everyone except herself. Ruth was respected by her colleagues and adored by her patients, yet privately she felt like a stranger in her own life. She had once dreamed of continuing her education, of becoming the kind of nurse who could lead others, teach others, shape the next generation of care. That dream had quietly suffocated under years of exhaustion and the belief that she simply did not have time. Ruth's turning point did not arrive as a single dramatic moment. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday when she watched an older nurse, someone she deeply respected, retire after 30 years without ever pursuing the further education she had once dreamed about either. The older woman spoke about it plainly, without bitterness, simply as a fact of her life. I always meant to. I never found the time. Ruth walked home that evening replaying those 5 words. I never found the time. She realized with a quiet ache that time is never found. It is only ever made deliberately on purpose by people willing to be a little uncomfortable for 30 days in a row. Ruth decided on a discipline that felt almost too small to matter. She would study for 30 minutes each night before bed, regardless of how tired she was from her shift. No exceptions. No perfect conditions required. Some nights she studied at the kitchen table. Some nights she studied on the floor of the hospital break room during a quiet moment. Some nights she was so exhausted that she read the same paragraph 3 times before it made sense. The internal dialogue in Ruth's mind during those early days was loud and persistent. What is the point of 30 minutes? What difference could that possibly make? You are too old to start over. Other people your age are already established. This is the voice that visits everyone attempting change, the voice of the old identity defending its territory. Ruth did not argue with the voice. She simply did not obey it. She kept opening the book. By the second week, Ruth noticed something unexpected. The 30 minutes had stopped feeling like an obligation squeezed into an exhausted day, and had started feeling like the one part of her day that belonged entirely to her. It was not about the hospital. It was not about her patients. It was about the version of herself she was quietly rebuilding, 30 minutes at a time. The obstacle came on day 19, when Ruth's schedule changed unexpectedly and she was asked to cover an extra shift, arriving home past midnight, utterly depleted. Every reasonable part of her mind argued for skipping that night's study, and honestly, no one would have blamed her. But Ruth understood something by then that she had not understood on day 1. The value of the 30 minutes was never really about the material she was learning. It was about proving to herself, especially on the hardest nights, that her word to herself was not conditional on her mood. She studied for 10 minutes instead of 30 that night, but she did not skip it entirely. That small act of stubbornness would matter more to her later than almost anything else in the entire 30 days. By day 30, Ruth had not become an expert. She had not finished her education, but something inside her had shifted permanently. She had proven, through direct evidence rather than hopeful thinking, that she was capable of sustained discipline even under exhaustion, even under doubt, even without anyone watching or applauding. She enrolled in a formal program the following month. It would take years to complete, not 30 days, but the 30 days had given her the one thing she needed most, proof that she could actually do hard things on purpose. Notice something important in both Walter's story and Ruth's story. Neither of them transformed their entire life in 30 days. What changed in 30 days was their relationship with themselves. The external results, the promotion, the degree, the deeper family bond, those arrived later, built on a foundation that discipline had quietly poured in the first month. This is where many people misunderstand the entire process. They expect 30 days of discipline to produce 30 days of dramatic external results. It rarely works that way. What 30 days of discipline actually produces is a rebuilt internal identity, a person who no longer needs to convince themselves they are capable because they have direct evidence that they are. Everything that follows, the promotions, the relationships, the health, the wealth, all of it becomes an inevitable consequence of the person you have become, not a separate goal you are chasing. There is a deeper layer beneath this that is worth understanding fully, because it explains why some people repeat the same failed attempt at change year after year without ever breaking through. Every human being carries what might be called a subconscious pattern, a set of automatic responses built through years of repetition, operating quietly beneath conscious thought. You do not decide each morning whether to brush your teeth. The decision was made once long ago, and repetition turned it into an automatic pattern that no longer requires willpower. This is both the danger and the opportunity hidden inside every human mind. The danger is that undisciplined patterns become automatic in exactly the same way disciplined ones do. The habit of reaching for a distraction the moment discomfort appears, the habit of speaking harshly when tired, the habit of postponing anything that requires sustained effort, these were not chosen consciously either. They were built the same way good habits are built, through simple repetition, until the mind stopped questioning them and simply began performing them automatically. The opportunity is that if automatic patterns can be built accidentally, they can also be built deliberately. This is the entire quiet power hidden inside 30 days of discipline. You are not relying on willpower forever. You are using willpower temporarily for a limited season to install a new automatic pattern that will eventually require no willpower at all. This is why the first days feel so heavy and the later days feel so light. You are not growing weaker as the days pass. The pattern is simply becoming automatic, doing more of the work that your conscious effort used to carry alone. There is an enduring law that history quietly reminds us of again and again. Character is not built in the moment of crisis. Character is revealed in the moment of crisis, but it is built long before in 10,000 small private decisions that no one else ever witnesses. The person who folds under pressure was likely cutting small corners in private long before the pressure arrived. The person who stands steady under pressure was likely keeping small promises in private long before anyone was watching. Discipline, practiced quietly and consistently, is simply character being manufactured in advance of the moments that will require it. Let us speak honestly about why so many people fail before they ever reach day 30. It is rarely because the task itself is too difficult. It is almost always because they attach their discipline to motivation instead of identity. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are unreliable weather. Some mornings you feel inspired. Most mornings, especially in the middle of a long month, you will not. If your discipline depends on feeling motivated, it will collapse the first time motivation fails to show up, which is usually within the first week. The old principle teaches something far more durable. Attach your discipline not to how you feel, but to who you have decided to become. Motivation asks, do I feel like doing this today? Identity asks, is this who I am? A person who has decided they are someone who reads every night does not need to feel inspired to open the book. They simply open it the same way they brush their teeth, without requiring an emotional justification first. This is the quiet difference between people who complete 30 days and people who quietly disappear on day 6. There is a practical exercise worth doing right now. Wherever you are listening from, say to yourself silently or aloud, I am someone who follows through. Notice how strange or even false that sentence might feel if it has not been true for you recently. That gap between the sentence and how you currently feel about yourself is precisely the distance discipline is designed to close. 30 days does not close that gap through hope. It closes it through repeated, undeniable evidence. Let us talk about attention, because in an increasingly noisy world, attention has quietly become one of the rarest and most valuable resources a person owns. Long before endless distractions existed, wise men and women still understood that a mind unable to focus is a mind unable to build anything of lasting value. Discipline and attention are close relatives. A disciplined morning routine is, at its heart, an exercise in training your attention to obey your decisions rather than your impulses. Every time you feel the pull toward the easier, more comfortable choice, and you choose the disciplined path instead, you are not just completing a task. You are training a muscle far more valuable than any physical one, the muscle of directed attention. This muscle, once strengthened, does not only serve your 30-day discipline, it serves every area of your life, your work, your relationships, your ability to sit with difficult emotions without immediately escaping them. This is perhaps the most overlooked benefit of 30 days of discipline. It is not really about the specific habit you choose. Waking early, reading, exercising, saving money, any of these will do. The deeper benefit is that you are training your mind to do what you decide rather than simply reacting to what you feel. A mind that can do this is a mind capable of building almost anything it sets out to build, because most of life's greatest achievements are not the result of a single dramatic effort, but the compound result of thousands of small, disciplined decisions made consistently over time by someone who no longer negotiates with their own impulses. Let us pause here and speak plainly about delayed gratification, because it sits at the very center of everything we have discussed. Every undisciplined choice is, at its core, a trade. You are trading a larger future reward for a smaller immediate comfort. Sleeping in trades a rested, focused morning for a few extra minutes of drowsy comfort. Skipping the difficult task trades long-term progress for short-term relief. Most people are not lazy by nature. They are simply making trades without realizing the true cost of what they are giving up. Discipline is nothing more than the practiced ability to see that trade clearly, in the moment it is being offered, and to choose the larger future reward on purpose, even when the smaller immediate comfort is standing right in front of you, whispering that this one time will not matter. It always matters. Not because one skipped morning will ruin your life, but because every skipped morning is another vote cast for the identity you are trying to leave behind. There is another quiet force working alongside delayed gratification, and it is called self-image. A person's self-image is simply the internal picture they carry of who they are, and it acts almost like a thermostat, quietly regulating behavior to match the picture regardless of what that person consciously wants. This is why a person who secretly sees themselves as undeserving of success will often sabotage genuine progress the moment it begins to arrive, not out of foolishness, but because the mind is uncomfortable with any reality that contradicts its own internal picture. 30 days of discipline is in many ways a quiet renovation of self-image. Every kept promise slightly repaints the picture. Where the old picture said, "I give up when things are hard," the new evidence begins to say, "I stayed even when it was hard." The mind does not change this picture through argument or affirmation alone. It changes through accumulated proof, gathered morning after morning, until the new picture becomes simply more accurate than the old one, and the mind, being fundamentally honest with itself over time, has no choice but to accept it. Decision-making itself becomes lighter as this shift occurs. A person with a clear, disciplined self-image spends far less energy negotiating with themselves throughout the day. The decision was already made in advance, the moment the discipline was chosen. This is a hidden gift buried inside consistency. It is not only about the specific outcome of the habit itself, it is about freeing the mind from the exhausting, endless negotiation that undisciplined people carry with them into every single choice, all day, every day, without ever noticing how much energy that constant negotiation quietly drains. History offers us a quiet reminder of this through the life of Abraham Lincoln, a man whose early years were marked far more by failure and hardship than by success. He lost elections. He faced business failures. He endured personal loss that would have broken many people permanently. Yet Lincoln did not build his character in the presidency. He built it in the decades before, through countless private decisions to keep studying, keep working, keep standing back up, long before the world ever recognized his name. By the time history called upon him, the discipline had already been built. The moment simply revealed what years of quiet persistence had already constructed. This is the pattern behind nearly every figure history remembers with reverence. The public moment of greatness is never the beginning of the story. It is the visible tip of an invisible mountain of discipline built patiently, privately, over years that no one was watching closely. Nikola Tesla spent countless solitary hours refining ideas the world was not yet ready to understand. The Wright brothers, running a modest bicycle shop, tested and failed and adjusted and tested again, long before their names became synonymous with flight. None of these achievements arrived overnight. All of them arrived through disciplined, repeated effort, sustained far past the point where most people would have quietly given up. Let us return to something deeply practical, because principles without practice remain only interesting ideas. As you consider your own 30 days, understand that the specific discipline you choose matters less than the consistency with which you honor it. Choose something achievable enough that missing it would require a deliberate choice to skip, not an accident of circumstance. This is important because ambition, at the very beginning, is often the enemy of consistency. A person who commits to 2 hours of exercise daily after months of inactivity is far more likely to quit than a person who commits to 10 focused minutes daily and actually shows up. Small and consistent will always outperform large and abandon. This single idea, properly understood, could quietly transform how you approach every goal for the rest of your life. There is a mindset shift worth sitting with here because it changes everything about how the 30 days should feel. Stop asking yourself whether you feel ready. Readiness is a myth most people wait for their entire lives without ever arriving at. No one ever feels fully ready to change. Walter did not feel ready. Ruth did not feel ready. They simply decided, and then began proving the decision true through daily action. Waiting for readiness is simply another sophisticated way of postponing discipline while feeling productive about the postponement. Instead, ask yourself a far more useful question. What is the smallest version of this discipline I could do today, even if I do not feel ready at all? This question quietly removes the excuse of imperfect timing, because there is always a smaller version available. On the hardest days, do the smallest version. On the good days, do more if you wish, but never allow a difficult day to become a skip day, because a skip day rarely stays a single skip day. It quietly becomes two, then a week, then a quiet return to who you used to be. Let us speak about the emotional weight of consistency, because it is heavier in the early days than most people expect, and lighter in the later days than most people believe possible. In the first week, discipline feels like carrying something uphill. Your mind will offer countless reasonable-sounding excuses, and here is something important to understand: they will often sound completely rational. This is because the mind is a brilliant lawyer for whatever it already wants to do. It will not announce itself as laziness. It will dress itself up as practicality, as flexibility, as self-care, as waiting for a better moment. Learn to recognize this voice for what it is. It is not wisdom. It is resistance disguised as reason. The way to overcome it is not through argument, because you will lose every argument against a mind determined to justify comfort. The way to overcome it is through action taken before the argument fully forms. Move your body toward the discipline before your mind has time to negotiate. This is why so many people find success simply by removing the gap between decision and action, placing the book by the bed the night before, laying out the clothes for the morning walk, preparing the smallest possible first step so there is nothing left to decide when the difficult moment arrives. By the second week, something begins to loosen. The resistance does not disappear entirely, but it grows quieter. You begin to notice small, unexpected rewards, a clearer mind, a steadier mood, a strange new sense of quiet pride that has nothing to do with anyone else noticing. This is the discipline beginning to reshape your internal identity, though it is still fragile at this stage, easily disrupted by a missed day treated carelessly. By the third week, most people report something remarkable. The discipline that once required tremendous willpower now requires almost none. This is not because the task became easier. It is because your identity finally caught up with your actions. You are no longer forcing yourself to become a disciplined person. You have quietly become one, and disciplined people simply do disciplined things, the way kind people simply do kind things without requiring daily convincing. By day 30, most people are surprised to discover that stopping now feels stranger than continuing would. This is the entire secret hidden inside the 30-day principle. It was never really about 30 days at all. 30 days is simply the approximate length of time required for a chosen behavior to stop feeling foreign and start feeling like home. Once it feels like home, discipline stops being a battle and becomes simply quietly who you are. Let us turn briefly towards something spiritual, because discipline at its deepest level is not only a practical tool, it is a form of quiet devotion. Every morning you choose the disciplined path over the comfortable one. You are practicing a kind of faith, faith that small, unseen efforts matter, faith that who you become in private eventually shapes what becomes visible in public, faith that your life is not simply happening to you, but is being built, decision by decision, morning by morning. There is a stillness available to disciplined people that undisciplined people rarely experience. It is not the stillness of having nothing to do. It is the stillness of a mind no longer at war with itself. When you consistently keep your word to yourself, an inner peace begins to settle in that no external achievement can fully replace. You stop needing constant validation from others because you have built something far more stable, a quiet trust in your own word. This is in many ways the deepest form of self-respect available to any human being, the simple private knowledge that when you say you will do something, you do it. Gratitude plays a quiet role in sustaining discipline as well, though it is rarely discussed alongside it. As the 30 days unfold, Take a moment each evening, even briefly, to notice what the discipline gave you that day, however small. Perhaps it was 10 minutes of clarity. Perhaps it was a single page that changed how you saw a problem. Perhaps it was simply the quiet satisfaction of keeping your word. Gratitude for small progress keeps the entire process from feeling like punishment. Discipline practice with resentment rarely survives 30 days. Discipline practice with quiet gratitude often becomes permanent. As we come toward the end of these 30 days together, let us speak honestly about what happens next, because this is where many people, having succeeded, quietly lose everything they built. The temptation on day 31 is to relax, to reward yourself by abandoning the very discipline that produced the transformation. This is understandable, but it misunderstands the entire principle. The goal was never to survive 30 days and then return to who you were before. The goal was to use 30 days to become someone new, someone for whom this discipline is no longer a special project, but simply an ordinary part of daily life. Consider extending the discipline, not because you must suffer indefinitely, but because you have discovered something valuable enough to keep. Consider adding one additional small discipline once the first has become effortless, building your identity one honest layer at a time, the same way a person builds physical strength, not all at once, but through patient, repeated effort that compounds quietly over months and years. Think again of Walter and Ruth, and notice that their 30 days did not end their story. It began it. Walter's early mornings eventually led him toward responsibilities he never imagined possible when he was simply trying to survive each week. Ruth's 30 minutes eventually led her toward a role teaching and guiding other nurses, passing along not only knowledge, but the quiet example of what disciplined persistence can produce in an ordinary, exhausted life. Neither of them became famous. Neither of them needed to. They simply became the kind of people who could trust themselves, and that trust quietly reshaped everything else. As you consider your own 30 days ahead, understand clearly what you are actually building. You are not simply trying to read more, exercise more, or save more money. You are rebuilding your relationship with your own word. You are teaching your mind through direct evidence rather than hopeful thinking that when you decide something, it happens. This single shift, properly built, quietly touches every corner of a life. Confidence grows not from affirmations, but from evidence. Peace grows not from avoiding difficulty, but from proving to yourself that you can walk through it. Purpose grows not from finding some perfect calling, but from becoming someone capable enough to build whatever calling you choose. There will be days inside your 30, perhaps more than one, when life itself seems to conspire against the discipline you have chosen. A child falls ill. A schedule collapses without warning. Exhaustion arrives from a source that has nothing to do with weakness of character. These days are not a test of whether discipline works. They are a test of what discipline actually means. Discipline was never a promise of perfect, unbroken performance. It is a commitment to return again and again, without abandoning the entire effort simply because one day did not go as planned. This distinction matters more than almost anything else discussed here. Many people treat a single missed day as proof that the entire attempt has failed, and in that moment of discouragement they quietly give up what 30 more days might have given them. But an old, enduring truth teaches something gentler and more useful. A single missed day is not a broken 30 days. It is simply one difficult day inside a much larger commitment. The measure of true discipline is not whether you stumble. Every disciplined person stumbles. The measure is whether you return the very next day without drama, without self-punishment, simply picking the effort back up exactly where you left it. This is resilience in its truest, quietest form, not the dramatic resilience of overcoming a single enormous crisis, but the humble, repeated resilience of getting back up after small, ordinary failures again and again, until getting back up becomes as automatic as the discipline itself. Nelson Mandela endured decades of hardship that could have justified permanent bitterness, and yet he emerged still committed to patient, disciplined progress rather than resentment. Few people will ever face trials of that magnitude, but the same underlying principle applies at every scale of life. It was never the absence of hardship that built his character. It was the quiet refusal to let hardship become the final word. There is one more thing worth understanding before we close, something history has quietly reminded every generation that has been willing to listen. Great transformation rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with fireworks or applause. It arrives quietly in an ordinary bedroom at 5 in the morning, in a tired hand opening a book instead of closing tired eyes, in a small promise kept when no one was watching, and breaking it would have cost nothing visible. This is where every meaningful life has actually been built. Not in the highlight reel moments, but in the countless invisible mornings that made those moments possible. You do not need permission to begin. You do not need perfect circumstances. You do not need to feel ready. You simply need 30 days, one small discipline, and a willingness to keep your word to yourself even on the mornings when keeping it feels like the hardest thing in the world, especially on those mornings, because those are the mornings that count the most. So here is the question worth sitting with tonight, long after this narration has ended. What is the one belief about yourself you are ready to leave behind today? The belief that you are someone who starts things and does not finish them, that you are too tired, too busy, too far behind to change now. What would it mean to spend the next 30 days quietly proving that belief wrong, not to anyone else, but simply to yourself in the privacy of your own mornings? Character is built quietly. It is built in rooms no one else enters, in decisions no one else witnesses, in promises kept when breaking them would have cost nothing but the truth of who you said you would be. 30 days will not make you perfect. It was never meant to. It will simply make you someone who has proven, through evidence rather than hope, that you are capable of becoming whoever you decide to become, one disciplined morning at a time. The future always begins with today's decision.